At first glance, it looked like nothing. A quiet trade, barely a blip on the NBA radar. The Indiana Pacers sent over some cash. The New Orleans Pelicans handed back a 2025 second-round pick. No players, no headlines, just numbers on paper. But here's the thing. In the NBA, small trades don't always stay small. Sometimes they're the first domino, setting up something much bigger, louder, and game-changing. Why would the Pacers want a random second-round pick 2 years from now? And why would the Pelicans give it up for nothing but cash? Because both teams are playing chess, and this tiny move might be the setup to a much larger power play, one we haven't seen coming yet. And once you understand what this trade really signals, it changes how you see both franchises entirely. Let's break it down. On the surface, it's simple. The Indiana Pacers traded cash to the New Orleans Pelicans in exchange for a 2025 second-round draft pick. No players were moved, no headlines were made, just a pick for cash. That's it, right? Not exactly. That 2025 second-rounder isn't just some throwaway future asset. It's part of a larger pattern. Because Indiana has quietly been stacking picks, loading their war chest for something more than just player development. And cash considerations, they're never random. They're a tactical way to grease the wheels of future deals, buying flexibility, leverage, and sometimes even favors between front offices. And the Pelicans? They didn't just give away a pick. This was intentional. Teams don't just hand out future assets unless they're trying to make space, shift direction, or clear the runway for something bigger. This wasn't just a trade. It was a signal. Because the Pacers aren't playing checkers. They're playing the long game. At first, a second-rounder might not seem like much. But in the modern NBA, these picks are low-cost, high-leverage assets. You can stash a prospect, use the pick as trade filler, or flip it when another team's in panic mode. It's the kind of subtle move that doesn't win headlines, but wins flexibility. And think about this. The 2025 draft class might be one of the most unpredictable in years. With potential eligibility rule changes looming, that year could be flooded with extra talent, especially if the NBA drops the one-and-done rule. The Pacers know this. They're not just drafting for depth, they're buying options. Their core, Tyrese Halliburton, Benedict Mathurin, Jarris Walker, is young, exciting, and just starting to gel. Adding a future second-rounder now means they can package it later, maybe in a blockbuster deal, or land a steal in a deeper draft class. This pick might not matter today, but in the NBA, timing is everything. And Indiana is stacking the right cards before the real game begins. Because Indiana knows the value of patience and they're quietly setting the board for something bigger. To most fans, a second-round pick doesn't move the needle. It's not flashy. It's not a franchise changer, unless you know how to use it. And the Pacers? They've been quietly showing signs they do. Second-rounders are the NBA's most underrated currency. You can use them to grease the wheels of a trade. You can turn them into rotational pieces on cheap contracts. You can even stash international players and let them develop off the books. But this isn't just about flexibility. It's about timing. The 2025 NBA draft could be chaotic in a good way. If the league lowers the age limit or changes eligibility rules, we might see the first double cohort in decades. High school stars and one-and-done college players flooding the same class. That means more talent, more depth, and more chances to land a diamond in the rough. Indiana's front office is playing the probabilities. A cheap second-round pick today could become a sneaky valuable asset tomorrow, especially in a stacked draft year. And don't forget who's running the show. Kevin Pritchard isn't new to this. He's been slowly collecting draft assets while building a roster that can compete now and evolve later. Halliburton is already a borderline all-star. Mathurin has real potential. The Pacers don't need to blow it up, they need to build smart. And moves like this one, they're about giving themselves more options when the stakes get higher. In other words, this wasn't a throwaway deal. It was a quiet move with loud implications. Let's flip the script. Why would the Pelicans give up a draft pick, any pick, for nothing but cash? Because sometimes subtraction is strategy. New Orleans isn't a rebuilding team. They're in the tightrope zone, good enough to contend on paper, fragile enough to fall apart with one injury. Zion Williamson, Brandon Ingram, CJ McCollum. It's a loaded roster with a heavy payroll. Every decision they make has to thread the needle between win now and don't go broke. So when they trade away a future pick for a bit of cash, it's not about the value of the pick, it's about the room it creates. This deal might have been about freeing up future obligations, or it could be a precursor to something else entirely, a bigger trade, a roster shakeup, or financial prep for an incoming piece. Think about it. Teams don't just hand out picks unless they're rearranging the furniture to make space. David Griffin knows what he's doing. He's been aggressive before, and this move feels like one of those quiet before the storm moments. Cash considerations might sound boring, but in the modern NBA, that cash could be the last dollar they need to lock in a signing, shift a cap hold, or align the numbers in a complex trade package. This wasn't the end of the move. It was the opening note. While everyone's watching the Lakers, the Celtics, or whatever drama is going down in Phoenix, Indiana is making moves in the shadows. No drama, no big declarations. Just smart, quiet stacking. This isn't your typical rebuild. The Pacers aren't tanking. They're not blowing it up. They're building, but with surgical precision. Tyrese Halliburton has blossomed into a franchise leader without the usual chaos that comes with star development. Benedict Mathurin is showing flashes of a future 20-point scorer. And with guys like Jarace Walker and Andrew Nembhard growing fast, this core doesn't need a savior, it needs structure. That's what this trade represents. Adding a 2025 second-round pick isn't about today, it's about leverage. It's a chip on the table for when the right opportunity presents itself. Whether that's during draft night, at the trade deadline, or when a disgruntled star suddenly becomes available, Indiana's front office is preparing for that moment. Not reacting, preparing. And they've done this before. Malcolm Brogdon, Buddy Hield, Halliburton. They've all come through trades that looked quiet at first, then flipped the narrative. The Pacers know their market. They don't attract superstars through free agency, so they've learned to work smarter, not louder. This rebuild isn't flashy, it's calculated. And this trade, just one more brick in the foundation of a team that's not far from shaking up the East. For the Pelicans, this wasn't just about giving up a pick. It was about tightening the screws on a roster that's constantly walking the line between potential and pressure. This team isn't in rebuild mode, they're in prove-it mode. Zion Williamson's timeline is no longer endless. He's explosive, generational, and one injury away from becoming a cautionary tale. Brandon Ingram, one of the league's smoothest scorers but always dancing in trade rumors. CJ McCollum, veteran leadership but aging fast. The Pelicans don't have time to play the long game with second-round picks. They need wins, now. So why trade the pick? Because every little asset counts when you're preparing for a bigger swing. Maybe it's cap-related. Maybe it's a tiny part of a future trade package. Maybe it's clearing mental clutter before they go hunting for a big name. In the chess match of roster building, this was the equivalent of moving a pawn to set up the queen. And let's not forget, David Griffin's front office has never been shy about being bold. Draft night deals, mid-season pivots. They've reshuffled before, and this move suggests another shift is coming. When teams start unloading small assets, they're usually making room for a player, for a contract, for something that doesn't fit just yet. This wasn't a surrender, it was a setup. Cash considerations. It sounds like the NBA version of spare change, right? Wrong. Behind that bland label lies one of the league's most underappreciated tools. Cash trades are like whispers in a loud room. Easy to ignore, but always meaningful to the people who know what's really going on. For the Pacers, sending cash wasn't just a way to grab a pick, it was a purchase of leverage. That money can often help a team move up a few slots in a draft, get an extra G League assignment, or sweeten a future deal where every detail counts. It's currency, plain and simple, but it carries weight in trade negotiations where egos and margins run thin. And for the Pelicans, accepting cash and letting go of a second-rounder might have been about smoothing financials behind the scenes. A small chunk of change now could help offset future cap penalties, luxury tax thresholds, or allow flexibility to absorb another contract down the road. It's the kind of minor cap maneuver that only shows its full value when the next move drops. Here's the thing, trades like these are almost never standalone events. They're signals. Moves like this happen when teams are quietly rebalancing, when they're about to shake things up, when they're laying tracks before the train barrels through. So the next time you see cash considerations pop up on a transaction log, don't roll your eyes, pay attention. It's often the start of something bigger than it looks. Here's where things get interesting. This wasn't a splashy move. It didn't break NBA Twitter. But trades like this are rarely done in isolation. They're puzzle pieces, early groundwork for something much bigger. Indiana is quietly building one of the most flexible trade portfolios in the league. Between their young talent, manageable contracts, and now extra draft capital, they're ready to strike. And the moment a star becomes available, whether it's a disgruntled wing, an aging all-star on the block, or a desperate team trying to dump salary, you can bet Indiana will be in the mix. This 2025 second-rounder might not headline the deal, but it could be the difference in a bidding war. Meanwhile, New Orleans could be clearing room. Think about it. What if this minor move was just step one? What if they're working on a multi-team trade that needs flexibility, or preparing to absorb a big contract without going deep into the luxury tax? These aren't random trades, these are set-up plays. Both teams are quietly aligning their assets, because in the NBA, timing and preparation are everything. The biggest trades don't start with Woj bombs. They start with odd little deals no one notices until it all clicks into place. This could be that moment. To the casual fan, this trade was nothing. A footnote, a line on the ticker. Just the Pacers buying a second-round pick from the Pelicans with cash. But in the NBA, the quiet moves are often the loudest in disguise. Indiana isn't collecting picks for fun. They're stacking leverage, building a future-proof war chest without tanking. Every asset they grab is another chess piece on the board. Another way to say yes when opportunity knocks. And the Pelicans? They didn't just sell a pick. They cleared a path. They trimmed the edges of their cap table, cleaned up the margins, and left themselves just a little more room to make a move that matters. So now, the question isn't why this trade happened. The real question is, what's coming next? Because when both sides walk away from a deal smiling, it's rarely the end of the story. It's just the beginning.